Well, hello everyone. My name is Frank Gray. Welcome back to session 2 of our real life Sunday school class series entitled Reasons to Believe: Tough Questions, Biblical Answers. Today, we're going to tackle the question, does God even exist? Let's get into it. Here's the question: does God even exist? The biblical answer: yes, he certainly does. And the reasons to believe that the biblical answer is correct. There are three that we're going to explore today: cause, design, and morality. We're going to get much deeper into all three of those. Many in our world today, and these are primarily the influencers, the intellectual elite, whether dead or alive, that our culture is still taking their cues from. And many of these elite make a reputation denying the existence of God. Ernest Hemingway: all thinking men are atheists. Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist who made the rounds on the debate circles: we are all atheists about most of the gods that humanity has ever believed in. Some of us just go one God further. Of course, he's speaking about the Judeo-Christian God that he has denied, as well as all others. Voltaire: those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities, thus laying at the feet of Christians most of the blame for all the tragedies in the world. Voltaire was here several hundred years ago, but his thinking clearly influences the headlines and the morning talk show hosts even today. Robert Pirsig said, when one person suffers a delusion, it's called insanity. When many people suffer a delusion, it's called religion. And then finally, just a statistic to round this out: about 8% of Americans identify themselves as atheists. The number is a little bit higher when you look at college graduates, undoubtedly reflecting the influence of their professors. Europeans, interestingly, about 25% are atheists. That's three times the number for Americans. But Europeans have always been the thought leaders for the liberal elites in America. In fact, in grad school, they were always wanting to be at European colleges and universities. I noticed that was a consistent pattern. And Europe tends to lead where America follows philosophically and intellectually. So, unless there's a turnaround in Europe, you can expect for the numbers on American atheists to continue to grow in that direction. In fact, in the last 10 years, there has been a significant uptick in the number of Americans self identifying themselves as atheists. So many people, including most of the intellectual elite in Europe and America, identify themselves as atheists, denying the existence of God. Well, what does the Bible say? In the beginning, Genesis 1:1 says, God. God is not defended, he is not proven, his existence is simply assumed. Psalm 14:1, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. John 1:1, in a reflection of Genesis 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. With these words, John identifies Jesus Christ with the Creator God of Genesis 1:1. Colossians 1, verses 15 through 16, a little bit more intellectual take on it, so stay with me. The Son, speaking of Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. We could go on, of course, dozens, hundreds of other verses from the Bible affirming the existence of God. But remember, this is just our response. The question was, does God exist? The Bible says, yes, he does. But now we have to defend our position and provide reasons for believing that what the Bible said is true. And as I've explained in previous lessons, we're not going to use the Bible to prove that the Bible is true. That's what's called circular reasoning, where the assertion is thought to prove itself. Now, with the Bible, circular reasoning is absolutely valid because the scripture is true. But we're going to be providing reasons that are persuasive to unbelievers, to skeptics who don't trust the authority of the scripture. So we're going to cite as reasons to believe logical answers, scientific answers that would be accepted by all thinking, open-minded people as valid. So here they are, the reasons to believe that the scriptural answer is correct. Number one, cause, and this is sometimes described as the cosmological reason. Cosmological referring to the cosmos. And what that's tipping you off to right now is that the cause argument deals with the origin of the universe, the cosmos. Number two, design, known as the teleological reason. Teleos is a Greek word that means end or purpose. And it describes the design reason because what we see in the natural world is evidence of design or purpose. And the underlying principle here is where you see design, there must be a designer, there must have been purpose in what was made, thus the teleological reason. And then third, you'll like this one, morality is the moral reason, so not difficult to understand at all. But the underlying principle here is that every sane person in the world, every person whose thinking and feeling faculties are hitting on all cylinders, those persons recognize that there is such a thing as right and wrong. There's no explanation for that universal experience other than the existence of a creator God who is both ethical and moral in nature. We'll be providing the evidence for that coming up here in just a few minutes. But let's start with cause, the cosmological argument. And here's the model that we're going to follow. This is an Aristotelian display of logic. Aristotle loved to assert basic principles, challenge them, and then reach a conclusion. And that's the model we're going to follow here. Number one, everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. That seems to make sense. The universe began to exist. That is an accepted scientific fact at this time in history. And then number three, therefore, the universe must have a cause for its existence. Well, that's our premise. Let's see how it holds up. First of all, let's go a little bit deeper on what causality is all about. The law of causality is the foundational principle of science and philosophy. It simply states that every change in nature is produced by some cause. Causality is the influence by which one event, process, state, or object contributes to the production of another event, process, state, or object. The scientific method is, in essence, a search for causality. Scientists see something in nature and they ask the question, what caused this? How did it get here? What is the process by which this thing came into being? That's why the law of causality is the foundational principle of science. So when we cite cause as a primary proof of the existence of God, we're not just stretching for some fringe issue to prove a point. We're going right to the very foundation of science and the scientific method. Now, let me show you how this works, illustrate it for you. So you see the beautiful picture on the screen right now. And the question that I want to ask you is, what caused this painting to exist? If you were a scientist and you were going to employ the scientific method to answer this question about the origin of this painting, you're going to ask, what caused the painting to exist? And the natural, logical, and truthful answer is an artist caused this to exist. An artist painted the pigments on canvas and came out with this beautiful result. It would be crazy to think it was otherwise. But just for sake of argument, couldn't the canoe have created the painting? Or couldn't the dock have created the painting? Couldn't that beautiful golden sunset have created the painting? And the answer is, of course not. An element of the painting could not have created the painting. This painting must have a cause outside of itself. It must have an external cause. And that leads us to our conclusion that the universe, the natural world, has a cause outside of itself. Only two options when considering what caused the universe to exist, two broad categories. The first is natural, and the other is supernatural. Natural means that space, time, and matter, those are the constituent elements of the universe. Space, time, and matter created themselves. The canoe created the painting. That's the natural explanation of cause. The other option is supernatural. Now, the natural world, as I just mentioned, consists of time, space, and energy. Sometimes I'll say space, time, and matter, but matter is energy, energy is matter. Those two are interchangeable. Since we already affirmed through our painting illustration that nothing can create itself, the cause can only be supernatural. And by that, what we mean is the cause of the universe must be something outside the realm of time, space, and energy, or time, space, and matter. Time can't create time, space can't create the space, energy or matter cannot create itself. The natural explanation is logically indefensible. We know that if something has begun to exist, it has a cause for its existence outside of itself. So the conclusion is the universe must have a supernatural cause. It couldn't have caused itself to come into existence. Now, I want you to follow the logic here. God is outside time. He is eternal. And as the scripture says over and over again, who was and is to come, the past, the present, the future, but stretching into an infinity of time, past and future. God is outside of space. In fact, the scripture says the heavens are the work of his hands. All that we see as space, we even call it outer space, all of that is in the hand of God. It's outside of God. God is outside of it. He is the creator of that thing, which he can put in the palm of his hands. It was the work of his hand. And then finally, God is non-material. Throughout the scriptures, the statement is made over and over again that God is spirit. Jesus even said those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's very interesting to me that for the last 3,000 years, as long as we've had the scriptures, there are these statements about God being spirit, and we never really understood why that had to be true. Not until Einstein, early in the 20th century, discovered what he called the theory of general relativity, which posited and was ultimately proven to mean that time, space, and matter all had a definite beginning point, a beginning point which scientists today call the Big Bang, the beginning of time, space, and matter energy. Now we know that that beginning had to be caused by something outside time, outside space, outside matter. And the scripture from the very beginning has identified God as spirit or non material outside matter. Now we know why, among other reasons, that the scripture has always insisted that God is spirit. One more thing along this line: God is also personal with a will to create. It's not simply enough to say that God had the ability to create, being outside of time, space, and energy, but the evidence of creation means that he exercised his will and chose to create what we see as the world today. Now, let's pause for just a moment and let our skeptical friends weigh in for just a moment on this whole concept of the earth, all the whole cosmos not being able to create itself and therefore requiring a supernatural cause. Our friend Stephen Hawking wrote a very famous book entitled A Brief History of Time. And in that book, he made this statement: because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself. Okay, that's a pretty bold statement. But what is the logical reply to that statement? I'm pausing to give you a chance to answer. Who created gravity, right? Where did gravity come from? Stephen Hawking stopped short of getting back to the actual first cause. And so he really, with that statement, doesn't even address the issue of who or what caused the universe to exist. The BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, and many, many others posit what they call the multiverse theory, that there have been and are an infinity of universes like ours. Again, I'm going to ask you, what is the logical reply to that? It's the same for a single universe. Well, where did they come from? If there is an infinity of them, what caused them to come into existence? So even the multiverse theory, which was posited as a direct answer to the belief that God created the world, doesn't even answer the question at all. I find it very interesting, and I will say on a personal level, very frustrating that so much of science education puts out these theories that are completely ludicrous. And what I mean by that is there's not a shred of any kind of evidence, much less scientific evidence to support them. And I cite the BBC because I was on their website this week looking at their scientific education materials, and they are really promoting this concept of the multiverse as an explanation that leaves out God, but they're presenting it as some type of proven fact when in fact there's not a shred of evidence to support it. They couldn't present any evidence, but they present this material to children and students, college students and graduate students, as if it's fact, which again, to me, that just shows how desperate they are to find an explanation for the cause of the universe that leaves out God. Okay. All right. Now, the gotcha objection, because anytime you have this conversation with a thinking skeptic, they're going to think by the time you get to this point that they are going to be able to turn this whole argument upside down. And they do it in this way. Well, if God created everything, if he's the cause, who created God? Gotcha. Okay. But remember premise one: everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. And that is certainly true within time, space, and matter. But God did not begin to exist. He is eternal, He is outside time. He's the creator, not the creation, the painter, not the painting. He is what is often called the uncaused cause, living outside space, time, and matter. So, there you go. There's the answer to the gotcha question. God himself is uncaused, being outside time. So if you're having a conversation with a friend, family member, coworker about this and they seem open-minded, or you want to start a conversation and see if you can talk about something other than sports and the weather, here's just a few questions you might want to use to get the conversation started. Hey, what caused that painting to come into existence, or whatever you're looking at, wherever the conversation is flowing at the moment? Hey, who created that car? Of course, they're going to say, "What do you mean created? Ford made that car." And you say, "Well, yeah, but what about the materials it's made of? Where did they come from?" "Well, I don't know. I guess they came from a smelting plant or a plastic factory." "Oh, okay, but where did the iron ore come from, or where did the petroleum come from that was used to make that plastic?" Just follow the line of logic back to the beginning of those raw materials and say, "No, where did that come from?" What you're trying to do is get them to understand that ultimately there is a first cause, and that cause either has a natural or supernatural explanation. And then you can lead them down the path that we just went down, showing that the supernatural cause is the only one that makes any sense. Where do babies come from? Have you heard of the butterfly effect? Where did the universe come from? If you just want to take a direct approach, the important thing is to just get the conversation flowing, because people who have been educated in the Western world's public education system believe that there is no other explanation other than time and chance for the existence of the universe. And we need to show them that there is a much better explanation, a more scientifically valid explanation, and ultimately, I would say, a truthful explanation. All right, let's talk about design, the second of our evidences for the existence of God. And here's where we're headed with this one. The universe has been finely tuned to allow for all plant and animal life. That is not a controversial statement. Even atheistic scientists will tell you that they will call it random chance, an incredible long shot, that there is life on any planet, certainly the planet that we're on planet Earth, and that everything just seems to have fallen into place in the most amazing manner to allow us to exist. Now, they're going to attribute that to natural causes, to time and chance. And here's our argument. Here's our three-stage development. Number one, the fine tuning of the universe to allow for life on Earth is due either to chance or to design. There's a natural explanation or a supernatural explanation. Two, it is mathematically impossible to be due to chance. Number three, the logical conclusion, therefore, it is due to design. Let's unpack this just a little bit. Sometimes the design argument is called the watchmaker argument. I'm sure you've heard of this in one form or another, but essentially it goes like this. If you were walking along the beach and you found a watch lying there in the sand, would you think the watch was formed by time, chance, and the environmental conditions of the ocean, that just enough time went by and enough chance happenings took place that it spit out this fully functioning watch into the sand? Or would you think, oh, somebody dropped their watch, right? That this was a watch designed by a watchmaker, probably crafted in a factory, and somebody dropped it here. You're not going to think it was a pure product of chance. You know, that the sand and the rocks and the salt sea and the barnacles all work together by chance to create a watch. It's obvious it was designed. Well, evidence of design is evidence of a designer. When you see evidence of design, you know that there was intelligence and purpose behind the creation of that thing. The earth is a thing that is designed for life. And I could literally go on for days citing hundreds and hundreds of factors that prove the earth is designed for life, not just chance. But let me just share three real quickly. If the tilt of the earth were greater or lower, the tilt of the earth as it rotates around the sun, the surface temperatures of the earth would be too harsh to allow life. If the earth's crust were any thicker, it would absorb all the oxygen. If any thinner, it would be too unstable to support life. The tectonic plates would be in motion. We'd have volcanic activity all the time, everywhere. And then third, the Earth's distance from the sun is just right to allow for tidal cycles and atmospheric conditions conducive to life. Now, again, I don't have time to go through the literally hundreds and hundreds of factors which are finely tuned to allow life on Earth. Here are three, but there are some very smart scientists who have looked at these factors in great detail, calculated the odds that any one of them at any given time might have occurred upon the earth, and then they've calculated the odds of all of these things happening simultaneously to provide for life as we know it, that describe the earth as it is. And the answer is mind blowing. In fact, I'm calling it the staggering mathematical certainty of design. So here's an illustration that I found in one of these books that has done the calculations. If you were to cover North America 3 feet deep in dimes, and then do the same thing with 1 million other continents of the same size, place one red dime somewhere among them, and then ask a blind person or a blindfolded person to randomly select one dime from all that mass of 1 million continents 3 feet deep in dimes. The chance of that blindfolded person selecting the one red dime is the same exact chance that all the fine-tuning factors of the earth could have happened as they actually are by chance. It is mathematically impossible for time and chance to account for the earth being as finely tuned as it is to support life. Now, what would our atheist friends say about that? Well, I've heard Christopher Hitchens, God bless him, who passed recently. I've seen him on many debates challenge the belief that we have a designer for human life or any life on earth or for the cosmos itself. And he cites poor design as evidence that there is no designer. And here's some of the points that I've heard him make. The wastefully large and old universe for our small, young planet. In other words, if there's trillions and trillions of stars out there, why did God do all that stuff? Why would he waste all that material just to support life on one tiny planet? A universe that will run out of steam and a sun that will explode. I mean, the universe has been expanding from its point of origin, but eventually it's going to run out of energy. The sun itself is eventually going to burn out. And I've heard Christopher Hitchens say, well, God must have been a pretty poor designer if he designed the earth and the sun to eventually just collapse. Hitchens also cites useless body parts, the wisdom teeth, our tailbone, the appendix, and a third eyelid. I didn't even know I had a third eyelid, but maybe that's why I'm a little bit droopy in the eye area. Who knows? And then, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I'm quoting the exact quote from Christopher Hitchens: human genitalia that looks like it was designed by a committee. Okay, there you go. Christopher Hitchens says if we really had an intelligent designer, none of these things would have happened. Well, let's talk about that. Let me suggest a few things. First of all, the universe is just the right size and age to support life on Earth. And I don't have time in this video to explore that in any depth. There are plenty of books out there that do. But let me just give you one example of fossil fuels. You know, modern society runs on fossil fuels. And I know we all love the concept of renewable energy. And certainly at some point, in the future, solar and wind power and hydroelectric, all that's going to play a larger role. But right now, it's somewhere between 80 and 95% of all energy used in Western societies is from fossil fuels. Well, fossil fuels take millions of years to develop. Fossil fuels, if you're not familiar, are actually the decayed remains of living organisms. So it is necessary for the earth to have been here for millions of years, for these life forms to decayed and then taken on the form that we now find them in fossil fuels, in order for us to fuel life as we know it on this earth. Just the right size, just the right age. Secondly, the universe was never designed to last forever. If you read the scriptures, you know that God intends for us to live forever on a new heaven and a new earth that will not decay. So the fact that this one comes with an expiration date is no proof that there's no designer. In fact, the scriptures would indicate that science has proven that what God says in his word is exactly what's going to happen. Third, body parts that seem useless or poorly designed likely have purposes we're unaware of. I mean, even with all the advances in medical science, we still don't know everything about the human body. I'll give you a quick example. In just recent times, the appendix, long maligned as a useless vestigial organ, is gaining favor as a repository for healthy gut bacteria. Imagine that. We're taking all these probiotics, trying to get healthy gut bacteria going, and the appendix may actually play a role in making that happen. On a personal level, I once drove a very poorly designed Ford Pinto. Even in its day, 1978, when I bought it brand new, senior year of high school, it was poorly designed even then, but it was still designed. And you know what? Given the fact that Ford engineers are not stupid people, I suspect they designed that Pinto exactly according to the mission that they were given by management. And it may have been, we want you all to design and assemble an economy car that may not be very reliable and may not last very long, but it's going to make us a lot of money. So, what we interpret as poor design may have been perfect design for the Pinto's intended purpose. All right. So, when you're having conversations with others who may be skeptical about the concept of design, here's some things you can ask them. Did you hear about the tornado that blew through the junkyard and created a 747? Of course, they're going to say, are you nuts? That could never happen. Well, that's the point. That's the point. Everything that we see in this world that shows evidence of design is proof that there was a designer. 747s don't just happen by time and chance. This world did not just happen by time and chance. It has a designer. On the same vein, did you hear about the explosion down at the lumber yard? When the smoke cleared, all those flying boards had created a finely crafted log cabin. Again, your friend will say, are you nuts? That could never happen. That's the point. No matter how much time and how much chance and how many explosions took place, a finely crafted log cabin is never going to come out of a lumber yard like that, right? Everything that we see in this universe, from a leaf to a star to a daffodil, all of those things are proof that there was a designer behind the object. And then, of course, you can use the same example that I used earlier about all of North America covered in dimes 3 feet deep. Now imagine a million universes of the same size covered with dimes 3 foot deep. What are the chances a blindfolded person could reach in randomly and pull out the red dime? That is the same chance of this world appearing as it is purely by time and chance. All right. Now, if you want to go deeper on some of these things, and we certainly don't have time to in this class, I want to encourage you to check out the website that is on the screen. You're going to find 4 different sections that provide much of the scientific data and the mathematical calculations that I've shared in this class. Where did all that stuff come from? Well, among other things, it came from this website. So when you have some time or you want to check it out or you want to get the data behind the premise, this is where you can find it. All right, let's move to the third of our evidences for the existence of God, the moral argument. Here's our premise. Objective moral values can only come from God. And what I mean by that, if we are merely the result of time and chance, that we're just a vat of chemicals, then Darwin was right. And it's the law of the jungle. It's the survival of the fittest. And every one of us is to do everything that we can to assure our own survival and that we're able to pass on our seed to future generations at any cost. If we have to kill other people, if we have to steal their bread, we have to take their country, we have to lie, cheat, and steal, it doesn't matter because it is the law of the jungle. Survival is all that matters. And I'm saying, no, that's not all that matters. There are objective morals, but they can only come from God. Premise 2. Objective moral values exist. I'm going to prove over the next few minutes that even people who deny that morality is an objective thing, they know they're wrong. Okay, they know in their hearts there is such a thing as right and wrong. The conclusion then is that God exists. Objective moral values can only come from God. Objective moral values exist, therefore God exists. Okay, let's get into it. Peter Singer, he asserts that there is no such thing as morality. And in doing so, he speaks for most of the so-called intellectual elites in the world today. He is a prominent advocate for atheism. He has been touted as the world's most influential living philosopher. And he is a professor of bioethics at Princeton University. I find that to be extremely sad and ironic, as you will see here in just a couple moments. As a Darwinist who does not believe in God and thinks it's all about survival of the fittest, he argues for a, quote, utilitarian approach to ethics. Not that there's any objective right and wrong, but in each situation we make a decision about right or wrong. And his criteria is whatever brings about the most happiness. So whenever we find ourselves in a situation, we simply ask what brings about the most happiness, and then we act accordingly. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? You can think of many situations where that would yield a good result. But I want to show you in Peter Singer's words, in his actual positions, what this means for an atheistic Darwinist. Singer believes that the most happiness comes from killing disabled infants, which may open the door for the parents to have non-disabled children, increasing their happiness. He believes in giving parents the option of killing any non-self-conscious infant who does not increase their happiness. You have a child, you have them for 2, 3, 4 months, and you don't find yourself happier than before you had the child. And by the way, what parent is happier at the 3 or 4 month mark when you haven't slept in months? All you're doing is changing diapers and trying to feed the baby and being up all night. I mean, it's stressful. Well, Singer says it's not contributing to happiness. So kill the baby. And Singer doesn't even have a clue about when consciousness starts, self-consciousness, when the baby would become aware of its own existence. So it's just a gray line about when you can kill your own children for not increasing happiness. I hate to even, these words are terrible, but Singer believes that it is ethical to rape disabled persons. And he states that increases the happiness of the rapist and possibly even the raped. But because disabled persons that he's describing are unable to speak for themselves, we can only assume that they enjoy the experience. You see how horrible this is. He also believes in using disabled persons as lab rats for medical and scientific experiments because that would increase the happiness of society. These positions, to be fair, are the logical applications of a Darwinistic, naturalistic, atheistic philosophy. He's just being intellectually consistent in asserting that if we can exploit, use, abuse other people and it contributes to happiness, to our happiness, then go for it. Yep, that is the natural outcome of a Darwinistic philosophy. But let me ask, how do you respond to that? How does that hit you? Do you agree with that? That we should just be able to kill babies? That we should be able to rape disabled persons? That we should be able to use the disabled as lab rats for experiments? Do you agree with that? And how do you think other people would respond to that? All kinds of people, not just your friends and neighbors, but people all over the world. But what do you think their gut reaction would be to Singer's assertions of all of these happiness quotients? Well, I have a theory. I believe that even though Singer's position is intellectually consistent with atheistic Darwinism, every sane, mentally, emotionally balanced person knows that what he's advocating is morally reprehensible. It's evil. It is a modern endorsement of the Nazi program to eliminate disabled people that resulted in the deaths of 300,000 disabled persons at the hands of the Nazis. And this was before Singer was even a thing, but he is advocating again for the morality and ethics of the Nazis. You see earlier why I said it's a little disgusting and ironic that he's a professor of bioethics at Princeton University. This is what passes as bioethics in the modern world. I think it is horrendous. And I want to assert that every mentally, emotionally healthy person knows that to be the case. And I mean everyone. Liberals know that's wrong. Conservatives know it's wrong. Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, even murderers know it's wrong. And I say that having spent some time working in a maximum security federal prison where I supervised and had many opportunities to have conversations with murderers and rapists and kidnappers. And do you know that most murderers will acknowledge that murder is wrong? Most rapists will acknowledge that rape is wrong. Kidnappers will acknowledge that kidnapping is wrong. While they're in prison, they're not proud of what they did. They're ashamed of what they did. And many of them would love to make amends for what they did. Even though they did wrong, they're not pretending that they did right. They know it's wrong. Even Satanists know it's wrong, and they would recoil from the thought of killing innocent children. The Nazi death camp guards who performed these horrible experiments and led people to the gas chambers, they knew what they were doing was wrong. So even as the world, the morning talk show hosts, the headlines of the newspapers, the popular magazines, and even major political parties, even while they celebrate Singer's disgusting philosophy, they know in their hearts that killing innocent, defenseless people, taking advantage of defenseless people and children, is absolutely evil. We all know evil when we see it. Even those who deny it know it's true. So, my question to you is, where did we get this inescapable moral compass? Where did it come from? Or even when we want to say there's no such thing as right and wrong, we cannot deny it in our hearts. Well, I believe it comes from being created in the image and the likeness of a moral and ethical God. Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. Well, what is God like? He's a moral God, an ethical God. All you have to do is read the scriptures embodied in the Ten Commandments, excuse me, in Exodus chapter 20. But there's 613 other commands found just in the Old Testament. And Jesus summarized every one of them in the New Testament, saying, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's what God is like. That's what it means to be created in his image. He has literally stamped his genetic code on us where we know right and wrong. Micah 6:8. He's shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. These are the ethics of our Creator: justice and mercy and humility. And God, it says right here, has shown every one of us what he is like. It is within us. Deep calls unto deep. Our spirit calls unto God's spirit, and we know right from wrong. Chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. I'll come back to that. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. In other words, God has made it plain to us what is right and what is wrong. Now, sometimes we very intentionally suppress that. We don't like that voice of conscience. And the scriptures are very honest in saying that if over time we continue to violate the voice of conscience, over time it will become seared. It'll become calloused over. And it won't be that true north beacon that it was in our younger years. So we can distort this sense of right or wrong to the point where we can no longer tell the difference. And that's why I keep saying a healthy, intellectually and emotionally sane person knows right from wrong until they violate that conscience so often and over so long a period of time that they can no longer tell the difference. Romans 2:15, they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. God has written his law on our hearts. It has been impressed upon our mind. That's where we get our inescapable moral compass. Now, let's give our skeptical friends their 15 minutes of fame or, or less. What is the atheistic alternative to believing that it is God who has given us a sense of right and wrong? Well, prominent atheists like Christopher Hitchens argue that morality has developed over time as people learned to live in societies. Now, I would, first of all, I would say, well, was there ever a time that people did not live in societies, right? Was there ever a time in history where individual humans just lived isolated in caves all by themselves? I don't think so. But Christopher Hitchens, and I've heard him say this many, many times in debates, says that, well, as we learn to live in community, we realized that we couldn't just give vent to all of our instincts. And so we had to tamp down our desire to kill and steal and rape and destroy at will. Essentially, we've learned to be polite because in being polite, we gain advantages that we wouldn't have otherwise. So essentially, people adapt to the demands of society, and that is the definition of morality. So when you hear an atheist say, we don't need God in order to be moral people, evolution teaches us to be moral people. This is what they mean by it. And I want to say, not so fast. Roman society said it was okay to expose unwanted babies, much like Peter Singer. They would literally just put them out on a rock, put them on the roadside, let somebody pick them up if they wanted to, but otherwise just die due to exposure and wild animals and insects. The Nazi society said it was okay to kill Jews. Hutu society in the 90s said it was okay to slaughter Tutsis. And I want to ask, are we okay with that? I mean, society said that's okay. If society defines morality, those societies said that this is good and this is just. Do we agree with that? I hope every one of us responds from from our gut. Absolutely not. Right? We are to protect the innocent and the defenseless. We're not to be the cause of their suffering. And I would say, if that's your gut reaction, it's because you are created in the image and likeness of God. And He has put His conscience within you, allowing you to determine right from wrong. And that is evidence of His existence. So here's our conclusion: evolution cannot produce morality. Time and chance cannot produce morality. Societies and cultures cannot produce morality. But we still all know the difference between right and wrong. We all know. And because objective moral values actually exist, God exists as well. He can be the only source of that internal compass. So, you want to have a conversation about this with other people? Here's some conversation starters for you. Hey, is there a single standard of what is right or wrong, or can each person choose their own morality? That's a good thing to ask a friend over a cup of coffee. Or here's one that's likely to get the fireworks started. Hey, do you believe that morality should be legislated? You know the old saw, you can't legislate morality. Well, in fact, every law is based on morality. Society has concluded that it's wrong to murder people, so we make laws saying you can't murder, right? Where does that sense of knowing that murder is wrong come from? This will lead you back to the moral argument. Do you believe that it was right for the Nazis to kill 6 million Jews? Well, of course not. They're going to say, well, then you follow. Well, why do you feel that way? What makes you so certain it was wrong to kill those Jews or the disabled people or the other ethnic minorities that the Nazis killed? Why do you rise up in revulsion at the thought of that? And of course, that will lead back to the fact that God is repulsed by those things. He hates evil. He loves good, hates evil, and he has put himself in us. So here's the summary evidence for the existence of God. Number one, cause. The universe can only have been created by an intelligent mind that is outside time, space, and matter. Number two, design. The intricate and infinite calibrations of the universe to allow life could only exist if created by a purposeful designer. And then number three, morality. All sane persons know the difference between right and wrong. This knowledge could only have come from being created in the image of a moral and ethical God. Well, there you go. That sums up our second session in the Reasonable Faith series. I would encourage you, if you're in the Houston area, come join us at 9:30 a.m. in the Woodlands Methodist Church. We do this every Sunday. We'd love to have you join us for discussion. Of course, also feel free to reach out to me or any of our other class members if you'd like to have a personal discussion about what we believe and what we teach. God bless you.